Welcome to Crossroads. A new nationwide campaign can bring an end to property taxes. That's right. You could soon no longer need to pay property taxes, but is a curse or a blessing? It depends on whether you own property. We'll talk about it in a sec. Also, meanwhile, a major narrative shift just took place. Something titles just shifted. Bill Gates has now said climate change will not lead to the end of humanity. That's right. And also another topic, Black Lives Matter is now under investigation for potential misuse of donations, which has been a curse on the organization for several years now. I'll be talking about these topics a lot more today, so hit the like button. Let's get started. Now, first of all, a new nationwide campaign can bring an end to property taxes. The push is happening at both the federal and the state level. And let me show you this. Business Insider says that beyond Ohio's musical pushback, because there's this whole AI trend and people are making music about ending property taxes and it's going viral. It says there's breakdancing in New Jersey town meetings in protest of property tax increases, and even rallies in Washington state where attendees can win a raffle to have their property tax paid for. It's a very, very American thing. Win the lottery, don't have to pay property taxes. But it notes on the federal level, lawmakers like Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene are advocating for the nationwide abolition of property taxes. And even Elon Musk, even him, weighed in stating that the taxes mean, quote, your house is a de facto lease from the government. In other words, do you ever really own your house if you pay property taxes? Does it mean that they've ended private ownership? Well, it also brings up the question of, well, yeah, let's get rid of it, but what happens if it is tax you in some other way? First on this, it says here, on the whole, the pressure seems to be coming from baby boomers, who are both the largest share of home buyers and help make up the largest share of homeowners across the generations. And it says there's a good reason on the surface for some Americans to be taken aback at their taxes. Property values have exploded over the last few years. What caused that? Gee, we'll talk about it. It says causing some homeowners' tax bills to grow by hundreds or even thousands of dollars annually. Now look, there's a lot of mixed views on this. On one side, property taxes are seen as a way to help prevent actual home ownership. Do you ever actually own your home if you have to pay property taxes? Because look, what happens if you don't pay it, right? They take your house from you. Do you really ever have private property if they can seize it from you if you don't pay rent on it? It's like, for example, like you're leasing something or you're paying like a monthly service or monthly subscription fee. You stop paying your monthly subscription fee, they take it away, and they can take away your house. So do you ever actually own it? Why buy? What's the purpose of buying if you have to pay for it forever anyway? That's one of the real questions with this. But some are also arguing that while ending the tax, yeah, it helps homeowners. The problem is a lot of states aren't looking to get rid of the tax. They're looking to offset the tax. And so they get rid of property taxes, but they charge you more in other ways. Like, okay, well, we're going to double your taxes in terms of like state tax for like other random services. It's a problem, like they're going to tax you one way or the other. Do you want it on your house or do you want it on other things? And the problem with that is that it kind of offsets the tax to people who don't own homes. So if you're renting an apartment, if you're renting a house and your neighbor owns their house and your neighbor has to no longer pay property taxes, they just take that tax and divide it up, and then the guy who's renting has to de facto pay what the homeowner used to pay. Is that good for everybody? Is that what we want? I mean, that's the problem. I would say actually there's a third option here, which is stop spending so much money on the tax level. Maybe, I don't know, stop giving free healthcare to illegals, or maybe stop giving them free housing and free food and free cars and free everything else. And then maybe stop charging all of us so much so you can get rid of property taxes so we actually own the houses we buy. And then that solves the problem. Another point, though, something very important. Because one of the reasons we can say, why are property taxes going up? It goes into the question of why property values rose so much over the last few years. Now look, big question for everybody. What happened over the last 5 years that caused the housing prices to rise? Because that is what is causing the rise in property taxes. Well, what happened? Well, we had a massive rise in illegal immigration. 10 million, 20 million, some say even more people came into the country. You bring that many people in the country, what do they need? They need a home, they need food, they need schooling, they need other services. Who pays for that? Well, you. You pay for that with your taxes. And what else does it mean? Well, it also means that they need more taxes, of course, but it also means that when they buy up new homes, it creates more competition for the existing homes. And so if you have a finite resource and you double demand for that resource, what do you think is going to happen? The prices of that resource rise because, again, supply and demand. That's how the market works. The other problem we saw is this was kind of the perfect storm. That rise in demand took place when there were lockdowns. And what happened during lockdowns? The construction of new homes was basically frozen. We were not able to build new homes, and so the new construction of homes was not able to keep up with the new increased demand of homes. And so that caused the property taxes and the prices of everything to go through the roof. Now, what is the solution to this? Do we change the entire system based on what is an anomaly, based on what was itself kind of something that should have never happened in the first place, or based on something that really is caused by another problem entirely, or do we fix the base problem? Is the problem mass illegal immigration? In America, we don't talk about it like this, but in countries like Canada, they do, where they note that mass immigration has caused a rise in rents and property taxes. Or do we fix it on the terms of just building new homes? What is restricting the construction of new homes? Mainly red tape, mainly zoning laws. And so how do we resolve that? Do we change zoning laws? Do we make it so there's less red tape on the construction of new homes so more Americans can actually have homes? The problem we have with that is some people don't want that. Banks, investment firms, and people who flip homes, they don't want the cost of homes to go down because it's an investment piece, and they don't want to have a new, blowing up of the housing bubble. Some people want to keep that bubble pumping. And so we're kind of caught in a very difficult place right now where, houses cost a lot more than they should, but some people don't want the costs of houses to go down. And so in order to even further reduce reduce the additional costs they have on the existing places, they want to take the amount they pay for it and basically divide it among the rest of the taxpayers. On a personal level, I would support the ending of property taxes. I believe it eliminates to an extent the ownership of private property, which I do not think should be existing in the first place. On the other side, I don't think they should offset that by just putting the cost on everybody else. I don't think that's a viable solution to it, in my own opinion. Now, on another topic, a major narrative shift just took place. And no, hell did not freeze over. But Bill Gates has now said climate change will not lead to the end of humanity. So maybe the whole idea of, blocking out the sun is off the table for now. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. A major narrative shift just took place. Bill Gates has now said that climate change will not lead to the end of humanity. And that's a big deal because that's the big narrative really with climate change. The whole narrative of what has justified all these policies, these global programs, really things that could be pretty damaging. Carbon taxes, carbon capture, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, even like blocking the sun to an extent, stratospheric injection, these types of things. All of it is based on the idea they need to save humanity from destruction that will, in fact, they say, be caused by climate change. If they're now acknowledging that climate change will not lead to the end of humanity, that means the base argument that justifies everything else is off the table. This is a big shift. This is massive. And this is after Bill Gates spent a lot of effort on claiming the opposite for a very long time, as did most of the media, I should note. And Bill Gates made a statement in an essay published on his own website. This is gatesnotes.com. This is what Bill Gates wrote. He said, quote, "There's a doomsday view of climate change that goes like this. In a few decades," which is always a few decades up, by the way, "cataclysmic climate change will decimate civilization." And he says the evidence is all around us. Just look at the heat waves and storms caused by rising global temperatures. Nothing matters more than limiting the rise in temperature. And then he says this, quote, "Fortunately for all of us, this view is wrong." Let me read that again. This is Bill Gates, quote, "Fortunately for all of us, this view is wrong. Although climate change," he says, "will have serious consequences, particularly for people in the poorest countries, it will not lead to humanity's demise." Quote, end quote. And he continues stating, "People will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future. Emissions projections have gone down, and with the right policies and investments, innovation will allow us to drive emissions down much further." So, on that point, he's not saying climate change is false, but he's saying the base narrative that, we need to save humanity from destruction through really extreme solutions. That's now off the table. And look, read that again, everybody. Climate change will not lead to humanity's demise. And Bill Gates goes on to say that the doomsday outlook is, quote, "causing much more of the climate community focus to too much on near-term emission goals, and is diverting resources from the most effective things we should be doing to improve life in a warming world." He says our chief goal should be to prevent the suffering, particularly for those in the toughest conditions who live in the world's poorest countries. Now, on that point, what are they really talking about? They're pointing, of course, to third world countries, and they're arguing basically that climate change is causing things like famine, it's causing water shortages, it's causing rising temperatures or hurricanes or other things that are causing displacement of people. Is that true? Are we just experiencing normal weather? I don't know. You tell me. But the narrative is that basically third world countries are less able to weather these types of things. And that in order to get by safely, they need some programs, nonprofit funding, government subsidies from first world countries in order to help them. Bill Gates, for his part, has been very involved on philanthropy within the third world. You can be the judge of whether you agree with those programs or not, but he does a lot of medical programs and things like that. Now, interestingly as well, though, Donald Trump commented on Gates' posts, and he claimed this is a big win. And Trump wrote this, quote, "We just won the war on climate change." The climate change hoax. So Trump just declared victory over the climate change narrative. And then Trump said, quote, "Bill Gates has finally admitted that he was completely wrong on the issue. It took courage to do so, and for that we are all grateful. MAGA." because, Trump's been very against the whole ESG narrative. Because remember also what's happening. On the business front, on the political front, on the foreign investment front, on the American taxpayers paying for everybody's bills seemingly in every country on the face of the planet, the programs around ESG, environmental and social governance, are coming to an end. And those programs created really a financial system behind the climate programs. People were making a lot of money by selling things like carbon credits, which if you don't know what those are, you should know, because that's the big business behind the climate change narrative. Basically, what were carbon credits? You could have people create programs to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, or inject aerosols into the stratosphere to reduce sunlight hitting the earth, which they were already doing in some places, including in the US, which are documented, by the way. They were already doing programs like this, and the way it works is this. The argument is we reduced the production of X amount of carbon. And so by reducing X amount of carbon, we've created this amount of carbon credits. Businesses can then buy this make-believe currency, carbon credits, representing, of course, the amount of carbon that was reduced, and they then use that to offset the amount of carbon they create. So, for example, an oil company will produce X amount of carbon emissions each year, and in order to reach net zero, right, zero emissions, they would then have to purchase a certain amount of carbon credits. And so a lot of investors, a lot of big business guys were making off like literal bandits by selling carbon credits. And so they were coming up with all kinds of crazy programs to pull carbon out of the atmosphere or, whatever else, and then claim they reduced carbon emissions, and then they were selling those. And that was the way the business worked around climate change. Now, that worked in some places. I would actually argue that some of it might not have been so bad. If you're reducing pollution, good for you. The big problem we had is in some countries like China, you had a lot of false stuff going on, they were doing kind of more damaging programs. Some were just faking it altogether, and then they were selling it on the open market, and there were basically no regulations in terms of how you offset it. So it created a really corrupt international business for climate change. And then what happened? All the people doing that then had the incentive to promote the narrative. And it turned out the Chinese Communist Party was even lobbying governments through businesses in order to basically reduce energy production in countries like the United States so the CCP could massively dominate the energy markets. There was a huge game being played, and all of us were kind of pawns in that giant global game that ironically led to more pollution because the CCP's energy programs are way worse than first world programs. Now, on this front too, government regulations and the monopoly of investment firms, this was used really to effectively force climate policies onto companies. There was a whole business structure that came about, and companies didn't really have a choice. If you wanted to get investment, you had to play the game. If you were, a major corporation and you didn't, engage in the net zero policies, you did not get investment. And there are some states now suing the investment firms that were behind that. In other words, the big business around climate change is going away, at least for now. And we'll see if it comes back, but at least for now it's going away. And the system, on other terms, is actually being dismantled now by the Trump administration. The Trump administration is really actively trying to get rid of it. Now, also speaking of Bill Gates, the Senate Judiciary Committee is now investigating the Gates Foundation for alleged funding ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, Senator Chuck Grassley said this. He said, according to recent reports, the Gates Foundation, through grants and direct payments, have funded the Chinese Communist Party and its allies. And he said, I'm writing today to ask you, writing to the Gates Foundation, whether these reports are true or not, and if true, how your organization's conduct comports with 501c3 requirements, nonprofit status that has some regulations on it. Now it says this, for Congress and the American people to better understand how the Gates Foundation is complying with tax laws governing nonprofit organizations, a 501c3 in this case. He says, please provide answers to the following questions no later than November 10th, 2025, coming up soon. 1. Are the reports that the Gates Foundation funded Chinese government projects and initiatives, including potentially Belt and Road Initiative projects, accurate? Please explain. We'll get into this. There were reports even from Chinese Communist Party's state media saying that the Gates Foundation did in fact do this. Is that true or not? Well, we'll find out. Number 2, it says, how many foreign projects has the Gates Foundation funded in the last 5 years? Did any of these projects provide direct or indirect funding to foreign governments? Please provide a list of projects and provide all records. The irony here is that Chinese state media would say yes. The number 3 here, when determining whether or not to fund projects and initiatives in a foreign country, what criteria does the Gates Foundation use to make that decision? Provide all records. Very important question also because Bill Gates was kind of close to Jiang Zemin, the former leader of the Chinese Communist Party who rose to power through the Tiananmen Square massacre, began the persecution of Falun Gong, a mass genocide targeting roughly 100 million people with organ harvesting, re-education through labor, torture, the whole 9 yards, and of course worked to basically silence any news of the persecution outside China and now even promote it by trying to justify the CCP's genocide. Gates actually met with Jiang Zemin when he visited, Hu Jintao when he visited New York and other things like this. Jiang. Number 4, did the foreign organizations the Gates Foundation has awarded grants to provide an IRS determination letter that it is a recognized exempt organization, or did the Gates Foundation obtain an equivalency determination from a qualified tax practitioner? If so, provide the IRS determination letter or equivalency determination for each organization. If neither an IRS determination letter or equivalency determination were provided, what procedures has the Gates Foundation put in place to exercise expenditure responsibility consistent with IRC 4945H? Provide all records, meaning they're investigating their tax records. That's going to be a big deal. And number 5, it says, have any of the expenditures the Gates Foundation made to foreign organizations resulted in a tax under IRC 4945 or IRC 4942? Provide all records. So they're looking into, were you involved in funding related to the Chinese Communist Party's, government programs? Were you complying with American tax laws? We're going to look at all your IRS documents on this, and so on. This could be very big. Now, look, we're going to see where this goes under investigation through Congress. This is not like through the Justice Department, right? This is not like a criminal investigation. It's Congress looking into it. But a congressional investigation could potentially lead to a criminal investigation if they find something they believe is criminal, because they can recommend charges based on their findings. We could also be seeing a lot more public disclosures as these investigations continue, and we could also find out a lot more of what's been going on behind the scenes with, organizations funding the Chinese Communist Party's programs, including the Belt and Road Initiative. I would actually add to this too, this puts additional pressure not just on the Gates Foundation, but a lot of other organizations. Because look, they're calling out the Gates Foundation on this. A lot of major organizations are doing the same thing. This is not like one organization. They're in the spotlight. A lot of them do it. And so by making an example of one of them, this puts a lot of others in a rough place. Let's just put it that way. And it could really make it so they're less willing to engage in those programs. And it could also, on the other side, lead to potential additional investigations of other organizations doing basically the exact same thing. Now, look, we'll see where this goes. There have been many reports, including from the Chinese Communist Party itself, the CCP's own state-run media, that do say the Gates Foundation has been spending hundreds of millions of dollars there. Let me show you this first. South China Morning Post. which of course was under Alibaba. Alibaba since heavily taken over by the CCP. They said, quote, since 2002, the Gates Foundation has spent $377.6 million in China across 271 grants, largely focusing on preventing disease, including COVID-19. What's the irony of that? Well, a lot of medical research in China is basically controlled by the CCP, so it gets a little awkward, right? And a lot of that is also tied in with the Chinese military. It says at least in terms of the medical experiments. It notes in 2023, the CCP's Global Times, which is one of the CCP's main mouthpiece media, official state-run media, noted that, quote, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on Thursday in 2023 announced that it has renewed collaboration with the Beijing municipal government and Tsinghua University on innovative therapies for infectious diseases prevalent in low and middle income countries, pledging to donate a donation of $50 million for the joint endeavor. What does that mean? It means they actually had a collaboration program with the CCP, the Beijing municipal government, meaning they were working with a foreign government on this. Does that violate American tax rules? We may soon find out, because this is exactly what's under investigation. And even just recently in September, just last month or 2 months ago now, it was reported that the Gates Foundation has given huge amounts of money to China, and that some of this has in fact helped the Chinese Communist Party's Belt and Road Initiative, the very thing being investigated by, again, the members of Congress right now. The CCP's Belt and Road Initiative, which is debt traps, foreign infrastructure projects, and the CCP's way of basically gaining control of resources outside of China. Now, like, speaking of financial investigations, there's a lot of other stuff happening. One of them, well, BLM is now under investigation for potential misuse of donations. Fox News says this: federal prosecutors are investigating whether senior leaders of the Black Lives Matter organization defrauded donors who contributed tens of millions of dollars during the 2020 protests. Two sources familiar with the probe tell Fox News. Now, I should note, this is anonymous sources. This is not like official government announcements, so take it as you will. I would note that Fox does have pretty good ties with the Trump administration right now, so maybe I think it is more credible, which is why I'm reporting it. But take it as you will still, because it is anonymous sources. But it notes this: the Associated Press first reported the Justice Department's ongoing inquiry is focused on the foundation's handling of donations collected in the wake of the George Floyd killing, when the group saw a surge of more than $90 million in contributions. And the question is, well, what did they do with that $90 million? Did somebody have their hand in the cookie jar? We'll find out. It says the probe is being led by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California in Los Angeles, sources said. And it says investigators have issued subpoenas and executed at least one search warrant in recent weeks as they examine whether foundation leaders or related organizations improperly managed charitable funds. Now, look, we'll see what goes on with this. There have been reports and even some charges on this in the past. Some of the allegations are that some leadership of BLM were using money for like property and private property and buying houses and stuff like that. There have been a lot of controversies, a lot of scandals related to the way that money was in fact used by leadership of Black Lives Matter. I would actually give one more thing here, and this is why I think this is going to be particularly interesting. If you were to ask me, and I'm just saying as a journalist who has been kind of watching the tea leaves, so to speak, I would say the Department of Justice might want to look into BLM's ties to the Chinese Progressive Association. Because you might remember, back in 2020, when all this was first happening, if you clicked on some of the donation things for BLM, where did it take you? It took you to a Chinese website. Why did it do that? That website was of the Chinese Progressive Association. And what is the Chinese Progressive Association? It is a CCP front organization tied in with the Little Red Guard, which has multiple branches in the United States, and the media, New York Times being one of them, covered it all up by claiming the one they pointed to was registered differently than the Chinese Progressive Association, more directly tied to the CCP. The problem is they're both part of the same umbrella organization, and they just claimed it was different because they're filed differently. Absolutely misled the public, absolutely lied, swept the whole story under the rug. Everybody forgot about it, but no longer, because here it is. The Daily Signal wrote this in 2020 because they actually broke some of the first stories on this. Daily Signal said this: the Daily Signal last month in 2020 revealed links between the Black Lives Matter organization and the Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco. Further in, it states, the Daily Signal's reporting is important because the Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco is the financial sponsor of two ventures associated with Black Lives Matter co-founder Alicia Garza, the Black Futures Lab and the Black to the Future Action Fund. Why is the Chinese Communist Party front group tied in with two of these organizations? Good question, isn't it? They state, quote, more importantly, the Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco trains activists and helped mobilize Chinese Americans for the violent protests we first saw this year, as well as in the 2014 Ferguson, Missouri riots. So a Chinese front organization is not only just tied in with, again, one of the leaders of BLM, and their website even redirected to their website, but they were also training them. Isn't that interesting? Why are we not talking about this? Why is this not being discussed in every major news outlet in the United States? And they add here, so why did like-named organizations in New York and Boston run independently but set up by the same Maoist Marxists do this, really? Because this is where the story was. The Chinese Progressive Association of San Francisco was one of the big ones with this. But they also had different organizations which are under the same umbrella, same name, same Chinese Communist Party front organization, but registered differently. They operate in New York and Boston. And the way the media, the big corporate media, covered all of this up is they said, well, it's different organizations because they're registered separately. The problem is they're the same organization. They just registered them separately. It's absolutely idiotic logic. And that idiotic logic basically derailed all the investigations. Everybody stopped looking into it. But why was the Chinese Communist Party's front organization tied in with, again, two major organizations of BLM? Why did their donation page redirect to the Chinese Progressive Association? Why was the Chinese Progressive Association involved in the training of these activists? And to what extent, if any, was the CCP involved in all the chaos and these divisive narratives that swept across the entire United States? I would say that if they're investigating right now BLM's, finances, well, part of those finances were in fact being run through the Chinese Progressive Association because, again, they used to handle some of the donations. Maybe they should look into this. And I'd say while they're at it, they could also look into how and why many major legacy news outlets lied to the American public about that Chinese organization. Because what did that do? It buried the story. Everybody stopped looking into it. When was the last time you heard about any of this? 2020? Why is this not the biggest story in the country? That the CCP may have been involved in training, organizing, and even donations tied to the things that burned down American cities. Why is that not one of the biggest stories in the country? You tell me. Was this covered up by the media? Did the media lie about it? Was this done knowingly? Was this done to protect BLM? Was this special interest? Are these news organizations tied in with it somehow? Are some of these journalists maybe involved with it? I don't know. That's a good question to ask. Was this special interest, ideological manipulation? Or was it something else? If you were to ask me in my personal opinion, I'd say maybe that should be investigated. Now, on another topic, illegal aliens have been able to get commercial driver's licenses in the United States, in some states at least, despite laws in place that are supposed to make this illegal. And the funny thing here is when people say, geez, you're giving out driver's license, commercial driver's license, to drive big rigs to people who don't even speak or read English and they can't even recognize road signs, don't you think that's kind of dangerous? And then when they say that, the heads of these states say, well, it's illegal in my state to do that. It's illegal in your state to do it, but you've been doing it. Does that mean you're violating the law? I don't know. But it turns out that some states, they've been letting this happen. And this has led to many people getting murdered, I'd say murdered actually, killed by dangerous illegal drivers. We all saw the video of the guy who made an illegal U-turn in Florida, blocking an entire lane of the interstate there, and murdered 3 people as they slammed into the side of that vehicle. We also saw recently another one where some, again, non-citizen driving illegally on a big rig just didn't hit his brakes and slammed into a bunch of cars and killed a bunch of people as well, lighting their cars on fire with the impact. Killed a whole family. But part of the argument to let them get licenses is that, well, there aren't enough commercial drivers who are American citizens. Americans just don't want to be truck drivers. That was the argument. But guess what? Some data challenges that argument. Maybe it's not that Americans didn't want to. Maybe it's that Americans were pushed out of the market by the mass illegal activity that was letting these people get these random licenses. The Blaze says this: despite numerous government programs of the past several years addressing the so-called driver shortage, the issue persists. According to the American Trucking Association, the industry's largest national trade organization. It says the association has claimed a driver shortage since the 1980s, estimating it to be around 60,000 drivers in 2023. It projected that shortage may reach 160 by 2028. And it says as well, yet more than 450,000 new commercial driver's licenses are issued each year. How does that happen? There's a shortage, but they're giving out 450,000 new CDLs every single year. They say that's according to the American Association for the Motor Vehicle Administration, and many of those drivers, it says, enter long-haul trucking. It notes as well, under the Biden administration, states issued over 876,000 CDLs between January 2021 and April 2022. That's a lot of licenses. It notes as well, the American Transportation Research Institute, the ATA's research arm that conducts studies, including analysis to support its driver shortage claims, has received over $8 million in government contracts since 2007. It notes as well, in a 2024 report, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine pushed back on the ATA's driver shortage studies, noting this. It says it noted that they had been conducted using proprietary techniques and assumptions that are not publicly defined. In other words, not legitimate research. Not research that can be, replicated. Not research that anybody can just go and, look into. Meaning, it's a big can of worms. We don't really know if it's true or not. And the added quote, it is not possible to evaluate the validity of their claims. So is a scientific or, study carried out credible if you can't verify it? Is it just what they say? Is there financial interest involved with that? Fair questions to ask. We don't really know. But it says this further in. American truckers in the 1980s reportedly made an annual salary of more than $110,000. And today, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median wage in 2024 was just over $57,000. So how is it that truck drivers today are getting paid roughly half of what they got paid in the 80s? Gee, what happened to it? What happened to the industry? Because the thing with supply and demand, how does that all work? How does the good old free market work? If you're having a shortage of a position, what do? You offer more money for it. So if there's a shortage, how is it that people get paid half of what they were paid in the literal 1980s? If there was a shortage, would they not be offering more money instead of less? You would only be offering less money if there was a surplus and not a shortage. So how is it that this was happening? Good questions to ask, I would say. And it also raises the question of, was there special interest in letting foreigners, non-citizens, illegally, against the law, get these commercial driver's licenses? And something else they should look into as well, some of these trucking companies basically hire subcontractors who, again, work on the trucks and things like that for the illegal alien drivers. And the reason they do that, as has been told to me by insiders in the trucking industry, is this. If you get, of course, somebody who has a truck registered under a corporation, right? They register a corporation and they place the truck as an asset of that corporation, and the driver goes and, slams into the back of a family and murders them on a freeway. When they go to sue that individual, the only asset of the corporation would be the truck the individual is driving and that illegal alien truck driver, not the company that hired them because they subcontracted it. And a big question is, has this become the modus operandi of an industry that is aware that it is hiring illegal aliens and that it's hiring, in particular, dangerous illegal aliens because it's cheaper? Good questions to ask. And maybe we'll get the answers on this because, again, this is also an under investigation in several states right now. All right, everyone, that said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. And let's see here. I went a bit longer today, so sorry about that. Let's see. First one, D. Richardson, you're saying if the property tax goes away, we will be given ownership. Will we be given ownership of our land back like before the 1900s, or will our state or feds still hold it? I mean, that's a good question. My big problem with the way that some taxes work is that some taxes, by effect, end private ownership. If you have to pay a tax ongoing for something you purchase, and if you fail to pay that tax, the punishment is that they take it away from you. Do you ever actually own it? If you own a home, and a lot of people know that if you're a property owner and you want to pass it on to your children, you need to put it in a trust, or when you die, they're going to charge your kids double for it basically, and it's like the kids have to buy it from you. It's insane. There are a lot of different laws in place, tax laws, that I would say have the effect of preventing ownership of property. And I disagree with these. I think that if you've eliminated private ownership, you've eliminated the incentive for private ownership, and the big question is who benefits from that. What I think this has done by effect, it has allowed the banks and the investment firms and major corporations doing the purchasing of these to basically dominate the housing market. And I would say some of them do not have good intentions. Some of them want to create, just a rental service. They're lobbying for the lack of production of new properties. They tried to prevent the construction of new properties because they want the monopoly. Imagine if you're an investment firm, and let's say you're a shareholder. Obviously, you want the shares you have to increase in value. If the asset is property, how do you increase in value? You squeeze the market. And by squeezing the housing market, what does that mean? It means you increase demand and you reduce supply. How do you do that? Well, you increase the population by maybe flooding the country with illegal aliens or new migrants, and you prevent the construction of new properties or restrict it. Meaning, you do things to prevent new construction. By doing that, you can double, triple, quadruple the price of the asset, which means you double, triple, quadruple the price of your shares or your holdings. And I disagree with that market. I think I agree with it in some regards, but I don't think on things that we need to survive. Because what do we need to survive as people? Well, we need a home, we need food, we need water, we need, some basic quality of life services. And I don't think you should squeeze these. I don't think these should be things viewed as, legitimate things to squeeze, because that reduces the quality of life for the entire country when you do that. I support the free market. But I think when you restrict construction of something, when there is demand, what that represents is state interventionism. And I think when you have too much state interventionism, you eliminate the free market. And so I would say the problems we observe on these students, these young socialists even, saying, I'll never own a home. The reason those young socialists are saying they'll never own a home is ironically because of socialist policies that have crept into the free market. The problem they have is socialism, state interventionism. But they believe the solution to socialism is more socialism. Why is that? Maybe it's because they don't properly educate these kids in schools about what socialism or state interventionism is. But again, it drives interest into a solution, and the solution is the problem, right? The solution is more of what caused the problem in the first place, more state interventionism. And the result of that is they start stacking additional regulations on top of the thing that caused the problem rather than resolving the problem. What is the solution to the problem here? Build more houses. Let us build more houses, obviously. Let us build more houses and the cost of houses will go down. Let us build more houses. Let us have more houses than we have people. Because what's the result of that? Yeah, you're going to have some derelict buildings. You're also going to have people who own more than one of them. But the result of that will be that, the cost of houses is now affordable. You can buy a house like you used to be able to in the 1950s off maybe a year of income. A 20-year-old getting married can go and buy a house. Wouldn't that be fantastic? I think so. Some people don't think so. Because if a 20-year-old can go and buy a house for, let's say, $50,000, some people will say, well, gee, how am I going to make money off the housing market? It does eliminate some of the issues of people who flip homes, which I know is it's a business. I know people who do it. It's a legitimate business. But what it does is it basically increases the cost of homes by flipping it. And so there are people who do not want new construction. Now, on the point of property taxes, I would say the taxes themselves actually also have the effect of this, right? If you increase property taxes, or if you have property taxes in the first place, it basically results as something where you never really own your home. Now, who benefits off of that? Now, let's put it this way. If your home is taken from you, who gets your home? Is it the government? No, it's the banks. The bank gets your home. The bank takes control of your home. They're the ones who own it, and then they can basically resell it. And so the banks are the ones who make out like bandits. They're the ones who can, you can take out a second or a third or whatever, fourth on your home. They, of course, make out like bandits on interest rates. They can increase interest rates. A lot of people fall into these traps. They give out home loans, and you're basically paying the man for your entire life. You will never own anything. And you have young couples who never get to own anything because of this. I think it's a terrible way to do things. And I do think that property taxes are part of that. If you were to ask me for the real solution to this, I would say this. Reduce mass illegal immigration or mass migration in general to the level within the boundaries of new properties and new jobs created. I would say legal immigration should take into account the ability to house and support the people coming here. If you don't have the houses needed to house new migrants, you should cap the migrants at that level. If you want to have more migration, then allow the construction of more homes. I believe the solution to that is reducing the red tape around new constructions. Also reduce the red tape around the creation of new businesses. Change zoning laws. Get rid of some of the red tape, which again causes the cost to go through the roof, especially in states like California. And if you do that, you'll find that the free market will be able to compensate. The free market will function as it's meant to, and you won't have a housing problem. Again, I believe the housing problem is artificial. I think it's being created because people are trying to make money off it. And they intentionally are squeezing you to increase the costs by manipulating government regulations, including red tape and zoning laws. AMVV, you're saying everyone should share in city, state, and federal expenses. I don't know why homeowners should foot the bill for all these functions when everyone uses them. That's a good point too. You're saying it's been unfair since the start. Also, seniors should be exempt, especially from school taxes. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, that's actually a good counter argument to the argument around property taxes. Because look, the way it's being framed by a lot of the establishment media, even in Florida, right, which is a more Republican state, where they're talking about ending again property taxes. The argument is this: if you end property taxes, basically the money from property taxes is used for local and state programs. It's used for police, it's used for fire department, it's used for roads, it's used for schools. Let's be honest with ourselves. Those are the narratives. What is the money actually used for? Mostly welfare programs and people who just plain old don't feel like working, right? It's a lot of that, okay? Let's be honest with ourselves. If you don't believe me, how is your local pothole doing? When was the last time they fixed a pothole in your neighborhood? Yeah, used to fix the roads. How's your road doing, folks? You tell me. Most of the money on taxes is not used for the things they tell us it's used for, okay? To be fair, in some places it is used for police and stuff, and I 100% support that. But a lot of your tax money is not used for you. A lot of your tax money is used to, pay off food stamps for non-citizens, free housing for illegals, money for some reason to every corner of the world, subsidizing those good old healthcare costs for Europeans and Canadians, and paying for the defense of other countries you have nothing to do with. You know what I mean? Sorry. It's not like a lot of your money is being used to better your life. Is the American taxpayer, you're footing the bill of half the world. Which wouldn't it be great if we could put half the world is dependents on our taxes? Who are you? How many dependents do you have? I don't know, 1.4 billion. How many dependents do we have if we divide it up? I don't know. The point AMV is making here, though, back to the point of the arguments used against getting rid of property taxes. They say that if they get rid of property taxes, it's going to mean that the money paid by property owners is going to have to be divided up between everybody. So people who rent a home will have to pay more taxes. It'll have to be offset for school and police and everything else. Is that fair? Well, some would say no, but AMVV is making a good point that some would actually say yes. Because if you look at it from the other standpoint, does this not mean that homeowners are unfairly footing additional costs for those programs unrelated to their home? Why is it that homeowners are the ones who have to pay additional money? Is that fair? I actually agree with AMVV on this. I think AMVV is actually correct on this. And thank you for mentioning that. What this has effectively done is put additional costs and punishments on people who buy and own homes. And they're paying for things unrelated to the ownership of their property, which are services enjoyed not just by them, but by everybody, including people who rent. And so I think this is actually the other side of it, which I think is more correct. That's not fair to homeowners. That's not fair to homeowners. B. Douglas, you're saying all of this, walking back on Gates's end, reminds me of the boiling frog analogy. They'll push a narrative as long as they can until there's pushback. Yeah. Well, and some people criticize Trump because Trump, there was that video of him, and he had all these, he's talking about American investment, and they're building back America, and he has Bill Gates and the heads of all these major corporations and so on sitting at a table with him. Okay, the funny part with this was right after Trump had the falling out with Elon Musk, and people were kind of joking on the internet like Trump is trying to make new billionaire tech friends because, he misses Elon, because Elon wasn't at the table. It wasn't until Charlie Kirk's memorial that, we saw Trump and Elon sitting together again. They had a falling out, and maybe they're friends. I think they're friends again, but it was after that whole fallout that Trump was finding other, big tech billionaire friends to hang out with, and Bill Gates was one of them. And, there were some conservatives who were unhappy about that because, Gates and Trump are kind of seen on very opposite ends of the spectrum. Gates has been very big on the climate narratives, very big on things like that, and also involved with a lot of other policies that Trump, especially with climate change stuff, a lot of conservatives really disagree with. And so, it was that whole thing. On that point, though, I do think Trump's interest is, look, these are American businesses. Microsoft is an American business. I know Gates has moved on from that. But, he's an American billionaire. He's an American entrepreneur. And again, it is, in fact, one of the core pillars of our economy, big tech and so on. And so Trump, working with Americans who've created a lot of wealth, and he has, as have the other big billionaires who some of us don't agree with on everything. The fact is, these are Americans. These are the guys who made Americans some of the big leaders on big tech. And is it not better if the Republican, president of the United States works with people across aisles to build back American industry? Because what's the alternative? Is you don't do it, and then what happens, right? Maybe, maybe. I think that's probably better for us. But on that side too, that maybe by bridging that gap, Bill Gates also bridged to the other side of the gap and dropped one of the real key narratives that created the more extreme climate change solutions, right? If you believe that climate change is going to destroy humanity, that legitimizes really extreme solutions. And so if you eliminate that really extreme projection, you then eliminate the necessity or perceived necessity of really extreme solutions. So, maybe we've kind of come to a little more of a middle ground here. I think the important point too, though, to add is that it doesn't mean that everything is off the table. Obviously, Congress is now investigating the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for potential ties to the CCP, which, should happen. I think you should still have things looked into that could be damaging to the interests of the United States, especially as it relates to China. Because, the other side with a lot of these big corporations, big tech has done great things for America. Really, it has. It's made us probably the most influential, among other things, the most influential and powerful country on earth. We basically control the modern world. The technologies that created the modern world are mostly American, right? And this is why Europe wants to tax all the American big tech companies, especially internet companies. But a lot of these companies also have made a lot of really underhanded ties to evil regimes like the Chinese Communist Party. And if they've been working with the CCP on things that have involved mass human rights violations, Cisco Systems is being sued for some of this right now. If they've helped create surveillance technologies to persecute people in other countries, if they've been involved in reporting dissidents to governments in other countries, getting people killed. Yahoo was accused of this in the past, even reporting Chinese dissidents to the CCP, and allegedly leading to people being killed. That was the allegation. Should they be investigated? Probably, I think so. Because, investigations are not meant to destroy the companies. Investigations are meant to hold them accountable and stop that kind of stuff from happening. And I'd say if we allow that kind of stuff to happen, what do we even stand for as a country? If America allows American companies to engage in the suppression of free speech and the persecution of religions in totalitarian countries, what do we stand for as a nation? If we allow that to keep going, what do we even represent? Is it make money by any means? Or is it that we support truth, honesty, freedom of speech, freedom of belief, freedom of religion? What do we stand for as a nation? What do we represent as a nation? If we only stand for make money by any means, that will be the end of our country and the end of everything we stand for. But if we stand for freedom of speech, freedom of belief, that is what America is. And so I would hope that we uphold these standards, really. And so I do think that, fine, bridge those gaps, make friends, make amends, come to a middle ground, but also have some accountability to prevent abuses and the undermining of what America should stand for if these companies have been engaging in it. All right, everyone, that said, happy Tuesday. Join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, let me know what you think. Do you think America should stand for something? Do you think our interest with business and investment should be just like make money, make a profit? That's American strength. Or do you think that America should say, look, we stand for something. If you persecute Christians, if you persecute other religions, we're going to hold you accountable. And if companies here are involved with that, we're going to hold them accountable too. What do you think the solution is? Tell me in the chat. And that said, join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.